This is the camera every YouTuber talks about.
Best camera for content creation.
The Sony
E10 II.
Best camera for vloggers.
is absolutely tiny.
10-bit 422.
A camera that can do it all. But can it really? Now this isn't a camera review. This is actually a story of how I went from this to this, then to this, and then finally to this. Now why should you care about a 24-year-old kid talking about his camera? Well, in all fairness, you probably shouldn't, but but I've been meaning to tell this story. I've been making videos since I was 16, and it has taken me almost a decade to afford something like this. So yeah, this is personal. And at the risk of sounding cheesy, buying this camera has evoked something profound in me, I guess. Like the want to document my life and the desire to make videos is back again, something I thought I had left behind in life. So in case you relate with a 24-year-old kid trying to relive his teenage dreams, welcome to Stories with Shrish. This is episode 2. This is a story of... What is the story? Yeah. This is the story of beating compromises.
This is 16-year-old Shrish. He had a bad hairstyle, recently got access to infinite internet thanks to this guy, and all he wanted was to make money using videos. And so he tried. And he tried making videos using this, a smartphone. And you see, phones were not good back then, and particularly not for him because of two things. One, he wanted to make videos indoors, and he didn't have this is a soft box lighting setup. Two, and he liked this thing called bokeh, simply known as background blur. All in all, he was a sucker for good production quality, but without any money for production.
I remember when I first started making videos, one of my close friends from back then, Ketan, he used to help me out with these videos. So I used to make tech videos, right? So I would need to show my phone in front of the camera. And I only had one phone at that point. So I used to ask this friend of mine. So he would accompany me to the shoot. So we used to shoot videos in his smartphone, and yeah, it was a very different kind of experience. It was difficult, yes, but it was also quite fun.
And so after a couple of years of making videos and making some money, he decided to buy this. This was the Canon 1300D, a camera no one should buy to make videos.
So the 1300D was actually a good camera. The only problem was that it was not meant for videos. It was a camera primarily for beginners, for photography.
You see, this camera, along with the 50mm lens, gave great background blur and okayish low light performance, certainly better than his old smartphone. But there were these three issues now. One, his camera was limited to 1080p, and everyone was starting to make videos in 4K. And secondly, the lens which was giving him that background blur and low light performance was 50mm, and that's a lot of distance in terms of focal length.
Okay, let me explain. So what used to happen back in the days was that I used to take my tripod and camera and set it up like really far. So somewhere around here. And then my chair, or where I would sit to record the talking head shots, used to be somewhere around here. And right now it seems very straightforward, but back then I used to shoot videos downstairs. And the problem was that it was not really an open space like this. There used to be like 3 rooms lined up parallelly. So there used to be like, this used to be like my bedroom space. There used to be like a living area over here, and then there used to be the kitchen area. So I used to literally place my camera in the kitchen, and my seating position or my chair would be in the bedroom. So the camera would shoot all the way through those doors to get the framing right. And that was the biggest problem of having like a 50mm lens on a crop sensor camera.
And thirdly, it did not have autofocus. And that was bad, like really, really bad.
What was actually difficult was setting the autofocus on the 1300D. So what I used to do back then was I used to set up my chair, and then I used to set up like some sort of object, like a pillow or a couple of pillows. And then I used to go back to the camera, set up the focus on this pillow, and then I used to come back to this chair, remove the pillow, and then sit on this chair. The problem was this particular chair, it's already pretty old, it had wheels back then. So every time I used to sit, the chair would move, and because I was shooting at f1.8, a little bit of movement would result in a shot that is out of focus. So yeah, I had to take the wheels off of this chair. And that's why this chair does not exactly have wheels. I remember my days with the 1300D very vividly. I would ask my mom or dad to set up the focus for me. So I would sit in the chair and I would ask them to set up the focus. And sometimes they would just miss it, and yeah, like I would just go on to talk, I would go on to shoot an entire tech video and then realize that I was out of focus. That was rough.
So 18-year-old Shrish was yet again, with a bad hairstyle, forced to compromise with his videography. But that was until 2020, when he met this guy. This is Dhananjay. You must have seen him on Instagram or YouTube. And Dhananjay casually mentioned that he wanted to sell his secondary camera, which was the Sony A6300 with a Sigma f 1.416mm lens. This was a camera Shrish had obsessed over for quite some time, because this one had everything his existing camera lacked: a crazy fast autofocus, sharp 4K footage, and insane low light performance.
The only problem was that it was pretty unaffordable for me back then. Like a new A6300 plus a good lens was an unaffordable combo for me. So when I saw that Dhananjay was selling his for 50,000, like lens plus body combo, I went all into it. Like I legitimately asked my mom for money. I, arranged a few thousand rupees from here and there. And I was like very desperate in getting that camera. Because I was like, in my head it was like, where can I get a deal as good as this?
So he decided to sell this small boy. And so after arranging some money from here, some from there, he finally got the camera he obsessed over for months. And this was supposed to make him happy and his videos better, but that didn't happen.
Now this Sony camera that I had purchased was a used one, and I was the third owner of that camera. And it did not exactly matter to me that much until it actually did.
A month after buying the camera, one day while recording, the camera stopped. But Shrish did not panic until the camera stopped again and again, until one day when the camera just seemed like it was dying.
I decided to take the camera to the service center, and there wasn't any in my locality, right, in my town. So I had to travel all the way to Kolhapur, which is like 3-4 hours from where I live. And when I went there, when I entered the service center or the repair store, I turned on the camera like usual, and the problem at that point was that this camera, after 2 to 3 minutes or 1.5 minutes, would turn off. Now the service guy is looking at me. I'm like this, I'm holding my camera, I've turned on the recording. A minute passes by, the camera doesn't stop recording. 2 minutes pass by, the camera does not stop. The guy then goes and sits in his chair, patiently waiting for the camera to turn off, and it is not. The camera just worked perfectly fine when I went to that repair store, and it was embarrassing. Eventually we kept the camera recording for like 10 minutes, and it did record for 10 minutes. And while it was like incredibly embarrassing because I had traveled like all the way like 4 hours or so to fix a camera that was not showing its problem, so the camera repair guy didn't know exactly what was wrong. So I just got it serviced like a normal camera.
20-year-old Shrish was happy that it was working again, but the camera was never the same again. It used to work, but not always. Some days, it would just fall sick. The battery would drain unpredictably. The camera would heat up and stop recording after 5 minutes. 4K recording was available, but it only recorded for 5 to 6 minutes.
Back then, I was shooting videos with a dying camera. And it was frustrating because everything had to be perfect for that camera to work. Like basically, I had to make sure that the batteries are fully charged. I would have to turn the AC 1 hour in advance to make sure that the temperature is just right for that camera. On top of it, I would just really by heart whatever lines I was going to speak, because I only had like a 10-minute video in which the camera would turn on, right, and record. So if I missed this 10-minute video, then like the camera would just turn off and the recording would be gone. So it was very challenging. Plus there was obviously that possibility that, maybe I will start recording and the camera might just not turn on, or maybe it would not record. So that whole experience was very frustrating. And for me, a camera is supposed to be a tool, right? It's not supposed to be something that controls your process of making videos or telling stories. But with this camera, it was quite the opposite. And all of this used to feel like a big compromise, again. I went from a smartphone to the 1300D because I did not want to compromise on the quality. Then I went from 1300D to the A6300 because I did not want to compromise on the convenience aspect of it. And even then, I was finding myself compromising, adjusting to a camera and telling stories, or sometimes not telling stories because I wouldn't just trust my camera.
He missed a lot of good moments because of this camera, and so he had to compromise.
But not anymore, I guess. Okay, alright, that was pretty cheesy. And unfortunately, if there's anything I've learned in the last few years of using camera equipment or shooting videos, in fact, is this whole process of making videos and telling stories is just a process of problem solving, right? There's always going to be compromises, there's always going to be problems that we have to figure out. And so I'm okay with that. The autofocus on the ZV E10 II is okay. I had expected much more from this. Because I've seen that in situations where there is some foreground and there is a busy background, it does tend to struggle with what to focus on. But I wanted to see if this is a camera that is like, that can do it all, that is just perfect. And it is not. I know for a fact that there are going to be certain situations where I have to still put the camera first before the story, right? But that is fine, because I come from a place where there were like 100 compromises, 100 adjustments, 100 issues while recording videos. The biggest problem back then was just affordability. Like, now that I look back, buying a 30,000 rupees camera doesn't seem like that big of a deal, right? Buying a used camera for 50,000 rupees doesn't seem that big of a deal. But I remember I was still trying to make YouTube work. And back then my income from YouTube was very unpredictable. Some days I would get the $100 from YouTube. Some days I might get a smaller sponsorship and stuff. So I used to be like very calculative in my head. Like, okay, I don't have enough money to afford this. But with time, everything changed. My spending power started to increase and everything. And this actually makes my life quite a lot easier. Like, for starters, there's a flippable rotating screen. So right now I can see that the video is being recorded. I can see myself in the screen. I did not have this. It just feels really nice. Because back then, buying a Sony A6400 or A6500, these cameras used to cost like 65,000-70,000, for the body. Back then, it used to feel like a distant dream. Like, when I told you that the Sony A6300 would just randomly stop recording, and that used to also happen with my older 1300D as well, when it used to hit the temperature or recording limit. It was so funny, like half of the times it would happen that I'm sitting in front of the camera, I'm speaking to the camera, and the camera would have stopped recording like 5 minutes ago. Like, if you were watching this externally as a spectator, that was, it was pretty funny, but frustrating for me. I used to almost wonder, like, how can I afford a camera that is so expensive? And then it wasn't just about, even affording the camera. It was more or less about buying a camera body for like 60,000-70,000 rupees and then spending 30,000-40,000 rupees another on a camera lens. It just always seemed, very out of reach. The colors on this camera, like, so this is the first time I'm using 10-bit color. Like, of course, this camera has 10-bit capabilities, right? And I used to watch a lot of these videos or camera reviews on YouTube, and a lot of people would talk about 10-bit color. And I never really understood what all that fuss is about. Like, sure, in theory I did, but I was like, how much of difference is that going to make, right? And now that I'm actually recording videos with this camera, it does make a lot of difference. Like, the footage that is coming out of this camera, I've never produced anything like this. For me, the jump of going from 8-bit to 10-bit does feel very significant. So I bought this camera with the kit lens for 70,000 rupees, which I believe is a steal deal, because usually this camera sells for like 1 lakh or 90,000, 95,000 or something. And I got this during an Amazon sale for like 72,000 something. And I just think that's a banger deal for this camera. And I did not buy a separate lens because I already had the lens that is attached to this camera, which is the Sigma f1.4 30mm lens. This is the lens I had invested in like a couple of years ago, and I still believe this is one of the best investments I've made to this date. And then I have my other filming gear. So I have invested in a softbox, right? I did that, I think, last year or so. And then I have a good enough tripod. This is not a tripod, I'm using a light stand because my tripod is upstairs. But I have a tripod that is decent now. Back then I used to shoot on tripod that used to cost like 700, 800 rupees. And those tripods were just not good enough. Like, they were not sturdy enough. They used to not inspire confidence. And there used to always be that fear of, like, is my camera going to fall off? So it has been a very slow progression towards building a camera gear. And I know in the camera world this is not that big of a deal, right? Because there are people who use expensive, like really expensive gear. And compared to that, this still feels like, very tiny sort of thing. But I'm really glad about this. I had always thought like the softbox, tripod, lenses, all of that was sorted for me. The only piece left was buying a capable camera. And I finally have it. So